the ego and the soul, right? So these are the two characters in my show. You heard, right? So ego's like this East Coast, like New York guys, like, you know, listen,
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, like, you need to dim your light because people aren't gonna like you. And so I've heard that voice a lot, right? And then soul she's like, you know, she's just more subtle. She's like, Amber, you are here to be a star, right?
Welcome to What I Meant to Say. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, founder of Be Better Media and a mom of 4, passionate about human connection. Throughout my journey, I have experienced many What I Meant to Say moments. But since life doesn't give us do-overs, I've created a space to reflect and tell our stories again, with a little more grace for ourselves and the hope that we can help others and be better for having listened. Welcome to What I Meant to Say. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, and I'm here today with Amber Susa, and I am so excited to have this conversation because when I saw you play, Waking Up to All of Me, I was blown away at your talent, first of all, and your bravery to put that out there. And there's a lot of synergy in our stories, and our paths have crossed, you know, here and there over the last, I've been here for 10 years, and I just know that this creative process and what it does for healing is so powerful, and that really struck me when I saw your play. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, and thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you did this one-woman show, and you know, I would love to hear like how the idea was born, and then kind of go from there, and all the amazing. I mean, there's just so much emotion that went into that play. It was incredible.
It was very emotional for me to write it, and to every time I perform, I relive it at some level. But the way that it came about was like when I grew up, I was a performer. I was an actress, a dancer, a singer. Like that was the thing that I absolutely loved to do. And I look back and I also think, like, you talk about the creative process being healing.
Yeah.
I feel like as a young child, like I didn't on a conscious level know it, but on a subconscious, deep, like intuitive knowing, I knew that it was going to be important for me to be able to express myself in that way. You know, like we've talked about this, like I'm empathic, I'm deep feeling, like I feel everything so deeply, and I take on people, you know, people's stuff, other people's energy. And so I feel like as a young child, it just felt natural for me to dance or to sing or to perform, like even if it was just at my, you know, in my parents' living room. So
you would do that? I mean, from the youngest age.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my show, like how it starts out, which is so funny, but I sang Donna Summer, like She Works Hard for the Money, because that, like, I don't know how old I am, like, you know, 7, but I'm like belting out Donna Summer with my hairbrush microphone in my parents' bedroom. They had like their whole wall was mirrored closet.
That was so doors. 80s, right?
Yeah.
Or,
like the whole wall.
Yeah.
But I loved it, and I would just spend hours in there performing. And over the years, this is another part of like my story is just the abandonment of self in order to fit in, to belong, to, you know, connect.
Yeah.
So my story is like a series of being in alignment with my authentic self, which creatively expressing myself is big time in that alignment. And then moving away from that because for whatever reason, it didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to fit in. And then it would call me back.
Do you remember those times as a kid or at like the ages when you started backing off?
I mean, I remember being a very young child. I got my first agent when I was 10. So I would go up to Hollywood and audition many times a week. My mom would drive, I don't know, like the thought of driving up to Hollywood.
From?
Long Beach.
Okay.
Long Beach, yeah. But yeah, she would drive me up several times a week for these auditions. And so I was already, like, I would have to leave school early for auditions, or I would, if I got a job, I would have to, like, do school on set.
Yeah.
So I already felt a little bit different than the other kids, right?
Yeah.
And so I loved it.
Yeah.
And I also, at the same time, like, wanted to be a normal kid. And that, more and more, that started happening to me as I approached, like, my teenage years and like liking boys and doing what other, you know, tween and teen kids were doing.
Yeah.
So
because to do something different, you have to give something up. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
And I think that's true at any stage in life, but at that age, it's really hard. You're not really making that association. It just feels like, oh, hey, but I wanted to be at so-and-so's house instead of on the freeway driving.
Right. And you, I mean, as an athlete, right? Like when you're like a top athlete, if that's what you want to do, you don't have a similar childhood to other people.
Right.
I remember my high school, my senior high school, the end of the year trip. I was acting and I was, you know, booking gigs, and I was also in a singing group. And this was like...
And your voice is amazing, by the way.
Thank you. It's okay.
No,
it's okay. But this was at the time, like right before the like boy bands and girl bands started, and I was in the singing group with like my at my dance studio. We had these like 5 girls, and we were called Point Device, and we were like the dancing singing group.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to be able to go on my senior trip to Puerto Vallarta because we had, you know, rehearsals and gigs, and I just remember like feeling so conflicted, and I wanted so much just to be on the senior trip and be with my friends, and I ended up quitting the singing group. And I went to Puerto Vallarta and like got hammered and smoked weed all, you know, it's like, I just wanted to be normal, and like kind of went to the other extreme of that for a minute. Yeah.
And it really is like those little times in our lives when you don't know that it's an abandonment of self. Right?
No.
And I don't know, because I always say, like, if I can help people learn younger than I do, you know, I learned some of these lessons. Yeah. But you really, there's a maturity and an awareness, and like, we all have to learn these lessons. A lot of it we do learn on our own through experience, right? I know. But to look back and to be able to look back and say, oh, that was one of those points.
That was one of those points.
Yeah.
Well, and yes, absolutely. And I wonder about that too with my kids.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder, like, can I help them avoid some of the pain that I went through by abandoning myself, by encouraging them to like nurture, you know, that connection to self.
Yeah. I think there's such a greater awareness now in our generation than there was when we were growing up of how to do that with your kids. And I also think so much of it comes from modeling. It's not what we say, it's what we do. So like when your kids see you putting out this creative process and talking openly with them about it, or you know, I think we didn't, in the past generations, no one said what they were scared of or how something felt, you know, how it's okay to struggle or feel sad, or, you know, there's so many things that we used to sweep under the rug.
Oh my God.
And it was a matter of survival. That was just kind of like the mentality of that generation. Yeah. And it served a purpose to a certain extent. Right. But I think our kids are better off with the sensitivity that we have towards being able to express yourself and talk about that authentic self, or be your authentic self as much as possible. The more they see that, I think that's where we can connect with them.
I do too. I sometimes I think about this, right? Yeah. Because like we've talked about this, right? Like I think that in our parents' generation of raising us, there was not as much of awareness. Yeah. And I also think there was like a belief that it wasn't necessarily appropriate to have conversations with your children about the stuff that you were going through. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, and you do have to be careful.
And there has to be,
it's like an age appropriate thing. Yeah. And we don't want to put stuff on them that's not theirs. Right.
That's the trick for me. I'm like, I want to be open with them. Yeah. Right? I don't want to pretend like I'm fine when I'm not, because they'll energetically feel that anyways, like I felt with my parents. Right. And I also don't want to put any burden on them. Yeah. You know? So it's like every situation you kind of check in and go, how do I do this?
Seriously, and that is parenting, and one of my favorite conversations, and I absolutely love figuring out parenting, and the thing about it is it's an art, not a science, right? Yeah. There's no rule book, there's no manual, and every kid's different, every relationship's different. Yeah. But Yeah.
I will say the majority of the time, and this is one of the things that I feel like I have the most sense of gratitude for, is the majority of the time I'm able to say to myself, I feel really good about the way I was able to mom right there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean...
And that comes from real life experience.
It does.
You know, the good and the bad,
yeah.
right? And hindsight's 20/20. So,
right.
you know, in your play, some of the stuff that you worked through.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
I mean, but, you know, coming through that, do you feel like writing all that, expressing all that has made you a better parent?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's something about the creative process as far as writing goes, or you know, putting it out there as a play. Like your life is a play.
Yeah.
It's a series of scenes, which are your life experiences.
And you played every person,
and
every personality.
Played all the characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're doing that, and especially in the writing process, it can be incredibly painful, because you're really having to take a look at things like, oh my God, like it's so clear looking back that I was abandoning myself. It was so clear. My first relationship, right? Yeah. I chose the wounded boy. That was a pattern that was set up early on.
Yeah.
And when I met him, to kind of go back into like the times that I abandoned myself, when I met him, I was acting regularly, I was dancing regularly, and that's the interesting, like that was one of the things that he was drawn to about me.
Right.
I was in full alignment with my true self, right? Like I was shining my light. Yeah. He was attracted to that. But as soon as it felt like not safe to continue to shine my light, I shrunk. Yeah. I dimmed my light.
To thinking that you were going to be more for him.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That you were going to... Yeah. And not playing the supporting role is something that came through in your play that I really think about a lot.
Yeah.
And something that resonates in my story is just playing that supporting role in so many other people's stories that you almost... It's another way of abandoning yourself, but you don't even see your story as valid because you're playing the supporting role in everybody else's story.
God, that makes me want to cry. I've never used that word, supporting role, but that's...
Have you ever seen have you seen The Holiday? When the movie, so it's Kate Winslet and Cameron Diaz.
I know I've seen it, but I
can't
remember.
The older screenwriter says to Kate Winslet, he says, you're the star and you're playing like you're playing the best supporting actress basically, but honey, you're supposed to be the star. And it's I love that movie. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, it's so good. But that's something that I think comes out a lot in the creative process, because you think that everybody else's story is more valid than your own. Yes. Or you don't want to step on toes or hurt anybody.
Right.
But you realize like your story is just as valid and real as everyone else's.
It is. And there are reasons why we make those choices. Like this scene is in my play, and it's so funny, right? Like when I'm coaching people, I ask them to share like significant moments. And oftentimes when we think about these significant moments that were impactful, we're like, that wasn't a big deal. Like, you know, because it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. But the fact that I'm 48 years old and I'm remembering something that happened at 13, 12, that's like significant, that means that it created a belief. It created a shift. When I was 12 years old, I got the lead in my first musical. I was Daisy May and Lil Abner. I had no singing experience. I had no theater experience other than, being Donna Summer in my parents' bedroom. And it was a summer youth conservatory. And like, I hadn't learned that it wasn't safe to shine my light. So I showed up and I auditioned and I got the lead, and it was awesome. And it was like it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my entire life.
Incredible.
Unbelievable. I was so happy. And I remember, like, I can go there in my memory, be on stage. I remember like feeling what the light felt like on my face, and there were people in the audience and I was singing. It was so magical. The next year I did the summer youth conservatory again. a lot of the same kids, right? A lot of the same girls. They cast me as the lead again, Kim and Bye Bye Birdie. And I found out that one of the girls' moms had complained to some of the other moms or to the director that, because this was like, you paid, right? It was like a summer youth program. It was camp type thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was cast as the lead 2 years in a row didn't sit well with some of the moms because they felt like their daughter was, just as...
Happens in sports too.
Oh, I know.
Right.
Because my ex-husband's a coach, so I've seen that.
Yeah.
But I was devastated.
Yeah.
And it made me not want to be the lead, right? It made me want to be the supporting role.
Yeah.
Because people like you better when you're the supporting role.
Yeah.
Right? She's like us.
Yeah.
She's just like us. Right?
You want to be liked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I spent all my life wanting people to say, oh, she's just like us. Right?
Right.
Ended up in drug rehab at 19. I was like, see, I'm just as screwed up as you are. See, won't you like me? And I look back on that now, I'm like, I'm not doing anybody a service by playing the supporting role at all. And by the way, the boys, the men that I chose to play the supporting role to didn't help them be their best self.
Right.
At all.
Yeah, nobody should be playing small.
No. And
we're all different.
Yes.
But yet we only connect with the right people.
Yeah.
The more authentic we are, the better the community around us we build, right?
Oh.
But we spend so much time in life, our stories are so similar.
Yeah.
In realizing these points of, not feeling comfortable shining, not, picking people thinking we're going to feel a certain way.
Right.
And that you're of service, but you really can't be of service until you're of service to yourself first.
Yeah.
And that came through so beautifully in your play as well. So
Thank you.
But you got to that addiction struggle, which is also such a huge part of generational story. So I don't want to miss that. And you just
I went from. We talked a little bit about this, and I have done a lot of for the last 9 years, I have been soul searching and deep diving into trying to understand why I am the way I am. Because for me, I grew up with two parents that loved each other, that had a happy marriage, right? We lived in a nice little middle-class neighborhood in Long Beach. I was able to do all the things I wanted to do. I was in dance class, I was in gymnastics, I was this. We were the perfect family, and I was the perfect child until I wasn't. And so a lot of the failures that I've experienced, like drug rehab, like dropping out of college, like toxic relationships, I have had so much shame around because I haven't had a tangible, justified reason why that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would look at my friends and their parents would have had an awful divorce or whatever. And I'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
Duh.
There's their pain point.
Therefore, exactly.
This makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an obvious big trauma, pain point. And I thought, and so I've spent most of my life until I started doing this deep dive work thinking, well, then I must even be more flawed. Yeah. If I had the perfect childhood.
So there comes the shame.
Oh my God.
Huge.
So much shame.
Yeah.
So much shame. Yeah.
And when you look back, so 2 questions. One, have you figured out what led you to the drug problem? And 2, what prompted you 9 years ago to start this deep dive that's gotten you to where you are today?
Okay. So have I discovered what led me to the drugs?
Yeah.
So my understanding, or how I have made the best sense of it, is first and foremost, I believe in generational trauma being passed down. Yeah. I believe in behavior patterns and addictions and ways of coping and dealing can be passed down.
Yeah.
And it's subconscious, so it doesn't even have to be witnessed or, like there's a lot of addiction and alcoholism on both sides of my parents historically.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think, you dig into so many families.
Yes.
Again, no shame. It's literally in every single family.
Yes. And that's the thing that's, it has never been about blame for me.
Yeah.
I love my family. I really do. I did have a wonderful childhood, but the truth is that you don't end up in rehab for an addiction to crystal meth at 19 without something, right? Like underneath.
Right.
So I think for me, it was a combination of the fact that like that generational trauma was passed down.
And not really talked about.
Like when I was 3 years old, my mom's younger brother, he was 26. He was an alcoholic and a heroin addict. And he took his own life when he was 26 years old. I was 3. Now, I get it. You're not going to have a conversation with a 3-year-old that goes into detail about this.
Right. But you remember.
But I know that it impacted me.
Yeah.
I know that it impacted me because it impacted my mom.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it impacted me because it impacted my parents.
Yeah.
It impacted my Nana, my mom's mom, right?
Yeah.
So, again, I'm an empath. I'm a highly sensitive person. I feel things deeply. Like, there's some stuff going on.
You can feel it. I can, see little eyes.
Little Amber is like, they're not talking about anything, but Uncle Jeff's not here anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt the energy. Yeah. I'm sure I did.
Oh,
I feel energy deeply now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 3 and I feel the sadness. I feel just the weight, right? And I believe, because I've also done a lot of soul searching into original wounds. There's a book by Vienna Farron.
Oh yeah.
Called The Origin. Is it The Origin of You or The
Yeah, it's ringing a bell. We'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah,
I do love her writing.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And she talked about kind of finding those original wounds.
Yeah.
And I believe that I felt as a young child the pain and the unhealed wounds of both my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah.
Right? They had not ideal childhoods. My dad lost his mom to breast cancer when he was 7. He was one of 4 children. They were 2, 6, 7, and 13. Okay? So my grandpa, my dad's dad, he didn't have time to grieve the loss of his wife.
Yeah.
He had to move right into being a dad, worked 2 jobs. And then the older sister, who was 13, kind of took on the mother figure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't talked about. My dad doesn't even have really a lot of memories of his mom. It's she went to the hospital. She didn't come home. It wasn't really talked about. Dad had to go to work to take care and survive.
Yeah.
Right? It's about survival.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So my parents met when they were 16, 17 years old. Then you have my mom, who she had a mom and dad who, had their own unhealed wounds. It's just, it's
right.
the way it goes.
Generation
right?
after generation. Absolutely.
So her dad was adopted. And I think, speaking of original wounds, I think, there's an abandonment wound of on some level, right? So
especially if it's not expressed, and it wasn't in those days.
So my mom's dad was adopted, and I feel like what the stories that she's told me about her childhood, they moved every single year that she was a little girl. My grandfather he was this charismatic, but always chasing another hopeful endeavor, right? I think trying to make himself feel worthy, right? So he was never the dad that she needed.
Yeah.
And she spent her entire life chasing his approval, his love, his validation, okay? So her parents divorced when she was 14. She met my dad. So they met each other these children, right?
Seriously, 16 and 17.
They were children who had these wounds that weren't talked about. Right? And my Nana, my mom's mom, when they got a divorce, she had her own falling apart. And so my mom often felt like she was the parent. Like she kind of fell into that role.
All of these, you see these in so many family stories. And part of why I love people who are willing to share these stories is we start to see, like, every time you bring these things out, there are more people that say, oh my gosh, I identify with that. That happened to me too. Or it's hardly ever like, how could that be? How could you do that? It's usually more people identifying, and the parentification of children, divorce is so rampant, and it's heartbreaking, and adoption stories, all of these things, they're part of all of our lives. Right. And if we don't talk about them, and that's what in past generations happened, but then you have a 16 and 17-year-old, they meet, connection almost always feels good on some level.
Well,
right?
And
that's what we're meant to be. Connected.
Totally.
But then what I am always trying to figure out is, how can we be, we can work on the best versions of ourselves so that we're connecting in strength.
Right.
And but we don't know that. At the youngest ages, when we're going through all this stuff, connection just feels good. Right? And having anybody that can understand a little bit of where you're coming from, if you find it. Yeah. It's powerful.
And you can see the pattern of, so my dad didn't have a mom. My mom didn't feel love or, worthy of receiving love or from her father, right?
Yeah.
And she was the new girl. And so she never really felt like she fit or had a place. So she meets this boy and she fills a hole for him. She feels worthy, right? He needs her. To this day, they just celebrated 2 days ago their 52nd wedding anniversary. Wow. And they really are like in love, and they do have a beautiful love story. But it did start out with these two teenage kids who desperately needed to feel loved, be needed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So back to my original wound, after investigating and exploring how previous generations may have affected me, I believe that the pattern of taking on the supporting role in a man's life because you want to feel needed, or you want to feel like you have a purpose, or you see that he has wounds and you think, I'll love him, I'll take on some of the weight of his pain.
Yeah.
Right? So I do think that
was modeled.
Yeah. And at some place, that's kind of where it was born for me, I think.
Yeah. And recognizing the pattern and doing these deep dives, I always say, you come to these points where, letting your story out like you did in your play and working on a book and all of that, it can feel like, oh, I don't want to out somebody, or I'm not here to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
And I definitely know that from your story already. But can you talk a little bit about what it feels like, when you hit those points where you're like, oh, am I going to upset somebody?
Yeah. Well, I'll share the story. Back in 2020, I had my spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul in 2014. So you asked me what happened 9 years ago, right?
9 years ago.
For me, it manifested in severe low back pain. So I was a gymnast, a dancer. I, at the time, owned a fitness studio. Moving my body, working out was always what I did to handle any kind of stress or any kind of anything.
Another thing we have in common.
Yeah. Either that or drugs, but I had given that up. So, So in 2020, I knew that I was at a place in my life where I had come far in my healing journey. I have a meditation practice, and I have meditated every single day pretty much for the last 9 years. But I got to a place where I knew that I needed to go to the next level in my healing journey. And I found a guy who we have a mutual connection with, and his work resonated with me so deeply. And I knew I knew that I needed to work with him. And he talks about trauma. Like he uses the word trauma. And I was having a conversation with my mom about wanting to work with him, and it triggered her, the fact that I used trauma, because I personally didn't have any big trauma in my childhood.
Right.
And my parents did a really incredible job. They were wonderful parents.
Yeah.
And, right?
They were carrying.
And things were carried and passed down. So I used the word trauma, and it really triggered her. And she got really upset and really hurt. And we got into, a bit of an argument. And she's like, I don't understand. Like, you had a great childhood. Like, what's traumatic about your childhood? And I felt so, invalidated.
Yeah.
And I said to her, Mom, at the time, this was 3 years ago, right? I'm like, I'm this age, I've been divorced twice, okay, in my life. So I'm like, at the time I wasn't divorced yet,
okay.
But I was getting ready to get divorced.
Okay.
So I was in a very unhappy marriage.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to my mom, I've been through this, I've been through that, I've been through, something has to help me make sense of this. So I'm not saying that I had traumatic childhood,
right.
But what I'm saying is that for my own, well-being, I need to understand and I need to heal, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise I just carry shame around.
Right. And once you have that realization, and that's very similar to I started writing like crazy. I had always been a journaler, and then I realized during my marriage, I kind of had fallen off, and I'd have thoughts, I'd work out, I'd have stories in my head, but I'd stopped writing.
Yeah.
And when you have that realization that you need to go deeper, whatever that creative process is, writing or acting or, anything that helps you go down the rabbit hole and figure out, because I remember having that feeling like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And once you ask that question, it's really hard to turn back.
It is.
But I happen to think, that's almost what getting to midlife, people talk about the midlife crisis,
right.
You hit that point and you really do have a choice whether you're going to look at it or you're going to turn away from it. And when you turn away, the pain and the shame continue and they follow you.
Totally.
Versus as hard as it is to uncover, it really is just continual breakthroughs, even though, we both know it can go like this, right? Yeah. It's not just this upward trend. It's hard.
No, it's bumpy.
It's really hard.
It's bumpy.
But
I did mention so the alcohol thing, that's an important part of my story.
Yeah.
So I went to rehab when I was 19 for this drug addiction that I believe at the time, I was in this relationship that was totally out of alignment. I had become a version of myself that was, small, being cheated on, but not being able to leave. I mean, just, right? Yeah. A shame on top of shame on top of shame. And so alcohol and drugs, I think just helped me cope with the shame that I was in the situation and I couldn't leave for whatever reason. So I went to rehab at 19. I got sober. They sent me to AA. And once I got a taste of being free from my addiction and feeling a sense of reconnection with my true self, I was like, I'm in, right? I was able to leave that relationship, and I spent 12 years being sober. 11 of those years active in the 12-step program. Okay. Fast forward, when I met my ex-husband, my second ex-husband, there's so much
relationships.
I know. But I had been sober for 12 years, and I had gotten a divorce from my first husband a year before that. And I was dating, and I wasn't in the rooms of AA anymore because it wasn't really feeling resonant for me anymore.
Okay. Because you felt like you had progressed past it?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel authentic calling myself an alcoholic. It worked when I was there. I appreciated the sense of community that it gave me, and the 12 steps have like beautiful, right? Like offerings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't know, I just got to a place where I got sober when I was 19 and I had been saying this for so long, and I just was like, I don't feel like that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't feel like saying, I'm Amber, I'm an alcoholic, or I wasn't resonating in the rooms anymore. I wasn't resonating. It just didn't feel like I was meant to be there anymore.
Okay.
But I was still sober.
Yeah.
For a period of time.
Okay.
And then I was dating, and most people drink alcohol.
Right.
Right? So you're going on dates and people are drinking and you're like, no, I don't drink. And if you don't have another, I don't like to use the word substitute, but kind of a substitute or a reason why you're not drinking, it's hard because you feel lonely.
Yeah.
And I had spent my entire life avoiding being alone.
Yes.
Right? Like, be true to myself and be alone, or abandon myself and at least
I've got some
people with me. Right?
Yeah.
Never. How about both of them? How about be authentic and true to myself and be with people?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't feel for whatever reason like I had that option to have both.
Yeah. Because for some reason at that point, what comes through to me is that you're not vibrating yet on the level of finding that community of where you could have both.
Right.
Right. And that's, I think, where we're all trying to get, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
And people talk about vibration. You're like, okay, well, some days my vibration is up here, right?
Yeah.
But then there are those days where it's not, and that's.
And I did not have a strong sense of myself.
Yeah.
Like now I do.
Yeah.
Like now.
Absolutely.
If I met a man.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, come drink with me. I'd be like, no. It's not my jam.
Yeah.
But I had to go through that process.
Yeah.
So I started dating him, and it was clear he wasn't going to stop drinking. And I thought, well, these are my choices. This is like literally what I thought, right? These are my choices. I can start drinking again and stay in this relationship, or I can stay sober and be alone.
So it didn't feel like an option to be with him, let him drink, and you not.
No.
I get
No.
it. I get it.
It didn't. Yeah. Because he likes to drink.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. It's fine.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, it was.
So today, what's your why for not drinking?
Because it dims my light.
Yeah.
And it unplugs me from the truth of who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally unplugs me. I am a light. Marianne Williamson talks about this, being the lamp. When I heard her talk about that, it made so much sense to me. Like, I'm the lamp, right? And I'm plugged into my source, and I'm shining brightly. Yeah. So what are the things that cause me to be unplugged? And for me, I have found that drinking alcohol, I'm just unplugging my light.
Yeah.
So it's just not.
It resonates.
Yeah.
But you have to have, like you said, you have to know the why behind it.
Yeah, and I also had to, P.S., drink for 15 years and be in a marriage as my unplugged self.
Yeah.
To get to a place where it was so painful not being my plugged in, lit up, authentic self. And I think that's, for the people that listen to your podcast, they're on this journey.
Yeah.
Like, they're already on this journey. So they understand that language. They understand, like, we're on the path to be plugged in the majority of the time.
Yeah.
And we've experienced the pain of not being plugged in.
Yeah.
And we've experienced the fear of what will happen in our life and who will we have to lose if we plug back in.
Yeah.
And become the star and stop being the supporting role.
Right.
And I kept being the supporting role for a long time because I was terrified of getting a divorce. I was terrified of what that would do to my 2 young children.
It's awful.
Awful.
Yeah.
Right? But it became so painful. And then when I worked with the guy that we talked about earlier, something shifted in me.
Yeah.
And I gave up alcohol in February of 2020. And I got a divorce in June of 2020. Like, it literally took that short period of time for me to plug back in to go, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It's too painful.
Gosh. I know the feeling, and you get on the other side of it, and the things that you have these lonely moments, and you have, I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
But that concept of not knowing yourself becomes too painful.
Too painful.
To not walk the walk. And I think I don't know. And it's to say, like, that's my choice, and you made your choice, and other people make their choices. And I think the only thing you can come back to is, and I tell my kids this all the time, you can control you. You can see things you don't like.
Right.
If you don't like it, look at, a lot of the things we don't like are a reflection of what we need to work on, right?
Yeah.
But as you see things you don't like, you have to work on yourself to be better at those things.
Yeah.
Not point the finger at other people or say, you did this, or it's part of your story.
Right.
But you're the only thing you're your only thing you can change.
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm able to have as successful of a co-parenting partnership with my ex-husband as I am, because not every day, but most of the days I'm able to go, yeah, obviously, duh, I unplugged my lamp. Mm-hmm. So that's not his fault.
Right.
I made that choice.
Yeah.
To become a lesser version of myself. I made that choice. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a conscious choice.
Right.
Right? At the time it felt like I want to be with him. I love him.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So how do you guys do that today? As far as co-parenting, like how have you improved? Because that's only been 3 years.
3 years in June.
And how old are your kids?
8 and 10. Yeah. Here's another thing that I want to share just for people that might be going through this, because I think it's really important. I was so scared to like break the family apart because of what that would do to the children. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. It's like, you can't ignore what is, right? And my turning point, this was COVID happened in March of 2020. So my soul's like, listen, we're going to have you plug back in and let go of alcohol a month before COVID happens. To
the whole world.
Prepare you to be your best self. Handling all this stuff. Yeah. No numbing, no distracting, right? But what happened was, so my kids were going through what that was like, okay? My son, like if you met him, he is he melts my heart. Yeah. He's chill, he's mellow, other than when he's on the field. He's an incredible athlete, he's a beast.
Awesome.
But like in life, he's kind and he's gentle, right? Yeah. He started having rages. And then my daughter started pulling chunks of hair out of her head. Oh. Okay. So I said to myself, oh my God, like I'm afraid of doing them harm by leaving, but if I stay, because at that point we could not be in the same room without having an argument. It was just so, Yeah. And I thought I have to go now, because if I stay, right,
it's constant turmoil.
Constant turmoil and tension, and both of my children are highly sensitive. They feel things. Right. Mm-hmm. So I said I have to go, and I love to tell this story because. One of our last conversations, I'll never forget it. We were in the kitchen. He was like standing, his back to the stove, and I was like right here. And I had said we tried therapy for a little while, and it was kind of one of those things like, Jay, try therapy for this period of time and then see where you're at. And I went and stayed with my parents in Long Beach for a few weeks. And I came back and I was like, yeah, I think it's done.
Yeah.
Right? And I said to him, I really hope that someday we will be able to sit next to each other at our kids' sporting events, dance recitals, right? And at the time he looked at me and he, with such anger, because he was sad, right? His sadness showed up as anger often. He just thought that was the most ridiculous thing that I could ever say. Are you effing kidding me? We can't even have a conversation without exploding into an argument. You think we're going to be able to sit next to each other, right? I will tell you, not that long after we got a divorce, we have sat next to each other countless times. Every sporting event, every dance recital, it's like I saw the vision and I held the vision and I plugged my lamp back in.
Yeah.
So I'm vibrating higher and I saw what's possible. And it happened.
Yeah. But to me, like, there's two things that I think about there. I mean, one, I've always felt like, oh, it takes time. Like, you have to have that separation part where, yeah, maybe you're mad, you're sad, you're angry. Like,
Right.
the grief process, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what you have to go through to not just tuck it under the rug. Like,
Yes.
we're saying, everyone,
Yes. I have felt it all.
Right? And I think that's a huge part of that.
Yeah.
But then also just, you're not you don't know the work that they're going to do, right? The other person's going to do.
Right.
But I would imagine, like, he has had to come through some processes and do a little, just soul searching because you can't stay stuck, right?
Well, and for him,
and come together in a different way,
which is
so commendable and amazing, like, and great for the kids if it's a healthy.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one in my life.
It can be, and I am honest with them. Like, there are days where it's harder than other days.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he has a girlfriend. He's had a girlfriend for a couple of years now, and she's lovely. Everybody gets along, right? But there are moments where it triggers me, or like the waves of grief come, and I realize, like, we're not the family unit. And they have,
Yeah, and for me, I always think it's that realization that you'll never have, no matter who you meet.
Right.
It's always going to be inviting in someone else's story.
Right.
And it's not going to be attached to what you created with this person.
Right.
And that's this stage of life and dating, and it's so much more complicated.
Yes,
at this stage of life, but it is possible.
Well, yes, that is one of the things that I think is the saddest, right, pieces. However, last week, the four of us went to the beach, and he and I sat next to each other, and my kids are running around, they're in the ocean, we're playing, and we were, I'm going to cry because it makes me makes me emotional. But, like, we were able to look at our kids and, like, appreciate them together. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
That doesn't happen with a stepmom or a stepdad, I don't think. Like, the step person
is different.
It's different, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like, that I grieve the loss of sometimes when we all go to my parents' house and they get to see the grandkids and they get to see, like, we won't have that. Yeah. It won't be our house and everybody will, but we can steal moments like that. We can, and we can sit next to each other and we can look at our kids and be like, man, they're awesome. Yeah. Wow, how amazing they are. Yeah. Like, we created that.
Right. And that's how no matter how much pain you go through, I always say this, they are who they're meant to be.
They are.
Right?
And they chose both of us, if you believe that. Which I do believe that. So I'm like, well, if they chose me, they chose him too. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. So
yes, I put that all in a show.
Yeah, exactly.
Put that all in a show.
Did your kids see your show?
They haven't seen it. They haven't seen it. My daughter really wants to see it. Yeah. Like, in fact, she's kind of pissed that strangers get to see it. She's like, Mom, what don't I know about you? Like, you're my mom. We tell each other everything. And I'm like, what you don't know, I haven't said this, but what I'm thinking is, like, you don't know that I went to drug rehab at 19. Yeah. You don't know that.
And she's the 10-year-old.
She's the 10-year-old, yeah. Like, I don't know.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot to take
and
on.
And you'll know. Yeah. I mean, because you're a kid, but they are kids, right?
They're kids.
And I think we're doing that a lot these days, where we're taking away things from kids when they really need to be kids. Like, the world has gotten so serious and dumping things on kids that are not age appropriate. And it's like, I think that's one of the finest things we can do as parents is we do get to protect them.
Let them have their innocence as long as they can.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've told her someday she will see it.
Yeah. Well, and I think even just them hearing you talk and going to do it and talking about the types of generational stories that you're clearly just sharing so organically in just the way you raise them. I think that's the turning point to me in everything that we're doing.
Well, it's right? Because it's like totally different than the way we were raised.
Right.
Like we're having conversations about things that we didn't have with our parents.
Yeah. And I think that, being highly empathic and very deeply emotionally rooted people, it's hard for parents to realize that or to know what to do with that in the past generations because that wasn't the way that pretty much anybody's household ran.
Right.
So there's that concept that I say this a lot, like everyone was doing the best they can with what they know.
Yeah.
But it's also our responsibility as parents to learn more, to know more, do more, and as we learn it, we have to act on it, right? So we're raising our kids differently, not because they did something wrong, but because we've realized things and we get to act on those things.
Right.
So now we're the parents.
One of the things that I have discovered, and you might relate to this, so you just mentioned like being highly sensitive, right? So I remember having some moments when my children were really young, and I was like, it's hard to be a parent of a child who feels things so deeply, right?
Yes.
Like, it's like, so, and I have awareness about it.
Yeah.
And I have an understanding about it. And so I consciously, handle it differently.
Yes.
Right? But my parents, my mom, I think in particular, I think it was especially, right? Here's the thing, okay? When you're carrying the energy and the weight of your own unhealed wounds, your capacity to allow someone else's big feelings to be is not as great.
So true.
Right?
Yes.
So I think my parents, particularly my mother, because we had a closer kind of codependent and meshed relationship, my deep feelings, which were, P.S., some of the stuff that I was taking on from them.
Right.
But I just felt things deeply.
Yeah.
I don't know that she had the capacity to sit down with me and go, I see you're having big feelings right now. Let's
that language is definitely not there. But look at what and all I can think of, this is what your meditation practice. I mean, that ability to be present and understand where you are, what you're carrying, how to let it go, and create that space between. They didn't have that.
They did not have that.
And it's huge, but people do it until you get there.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, start with 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
That's what I tell people.
It is so life-changing.
Life-changing.
It is.
Oh my God.
And it's the simple
saved
stuff.
my
and
life.
We could go on and on because I'm looking at America and we're handing up, we all have anxiety. Depression is huge. The suicide rate is through the roof. We have so many problems out there.
Yeah.
And there are drugs being handed out right and left to remedy these problems. But sleep, meditation, exercise, not in excess, we know. I exercise
in a healthy way.
Too.
Yeah.
The food we eat, our hydration, and you and I have connected on this stuff, and we don't talk enough about it. It's out there in a certain segment that's already doing it, but how do we push that out there in ways that people can just grab onto these really simple, grounded, holistic ways to feel better, right? And so
I mean that's a whole
but our parents didn't have that. So coming back to these generational stories and seeing the way that we can do it differently is not a reflection that somebody did something wrong. It's just,
we are living in a different time and we have different opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, I opened up a holistic health and healing studio 5 years ago because I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Right? When my back happened.
Yeah.
And I read the book, Dr. John Sarno, Healing Back Pain, the Mind-Body Connection. He talks about how, tension and unexpressed emotion, particularly anger, can cause chronic back pain. I was like,
really?
I don't think I'm angry. Like all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
My mom, I mean, not to throw her under the bus, but like, these are the facts. She has been on some sort of like, you know, anti-anxiety or antidepressant because back then when the symptoms were rising to the surface, as they do, if you don't
and there
look
is
at them,
there is a space for that. I'm not anti.
No.
However, there are so many things.
However, I knew that wasn't the path that I wanted to take.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was coming up for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were things for me to look at. There were things for me to heal.
And you were brave enough to do it. Like.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think people give themselves credit for that enough because it really is, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Like, and it comes through so beautifully in your play.
Thank you.
Because it's a hard thing to do, and it's gonna produce some tough days. But to me, you know, the light shines through when we're walking that path, and that comes through in your play.
Thank you.
So beautifully.
It was an incredibly healing process.
Yeah.
And not only is the creative process just, I think, a healing experience for anyone, whether it's through writing or performing or storytelling or painting or anything. For me personally, it was also very much me coming full circle back to the star.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like a one-woman show, there's nobody, like you're not a supporting role.
No.
Except for the characters that you're playing, but like you're out there.
Yeah.
Talk about like claiming, right?
Yeah.
Like I am no longer going to be the supporting role.
Yeah.
I am the star and I'm going to be the only one on stage. Right? Like,
and you
so
get to shine.
It was a very profound experience. And to be honest with you, this is the funny thing. When I had been thinking about wanting to do a show, like this is how it happens. Like my soul rumbles and it's like, don't you want to act? Don't you want to sing? Don't you miss that? Right? Because it's like, oh. So I had been a part of a show back in 2004, and it was a collaborative experience, and it was Vagina Monologues meets Menopause the Musical, but it was about boobs. It's called,
Okay.
And it was Booby Trap, the very breast show in town, and I was a part of it. And it was, some people talked about like breast cancer, some people talked about, funny stories about boob. Like I shared my stories about like having small boobs in a large boobed family and how, that made me feel less than, all these things. So I thought for a long time, like, oh, it's gonna be a show about like healing and transformation, but it's gonna be like a cast. There's going to be a cast of characters. Mm-hmm. And I kept like wondering if the people that I was meeting, I'd be like, oh, I wonder, I wonder if they're going to be in my show. Like I knew I was going to do a show, and I would find people and then it just would kind of fall through. This is how this is like a really cool thing, like how synchronicities happen and how when you have a desire and an intention and it's like from a place of like real authentic alignment, how like people show up in your life. So this was in 2019, and this is stirring in me, right?
Yeah.
I get a call from my friend Julie, who I was in the Booby Trap with, who I helped develop and create the show with, calling me from Atlanta saying, hey, I'm doing this one-woman show. I'm coming out to LA in a couple weeks doing a reading of it. I would love for you to come and see the reading. And also, P.S., if you're thinking of doing anything, this gal that I'm working with, this director, is awesome. And I was like, one-woman show? I was kind of thinking I was going to do like a cast, right? So I went to her reading, I saw it, and I was like,
Okay.
And then I started working with that director, and there were a lot of like push and pulls in that. I was like, what am I thinking? This is crazy. And I'd pull away for a little bit, and then I'd get back in, and I'd pull.
See, that's where that bravery comes through. People don't realize that pulling back. It's like there's so many steps in the creative process.
Yes.
Where you're encountering all of these things.
Oh, yeah.
The fear, the imposter syndrome, the
Yes.
can I really do this? What are people going to think? And there's just so many, of those.
Several times where I thought, this is stupid. I'm not going to do this.
And you kept going.
And I kept going.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Because on some level, the place that I'm at in my life right now, which is why I have the courage to take these big leaps, is I feel like, I abandoned myself for so many years, and I didn't listen to the callings of my soul for so many years and I ended up not happy.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
what's the alternative? You know what I mean? Like, that didn't work.
I do think that there's a point that, I've had this moment many times in the last few years where you're driving around and you go, well, one, the only way I for sure fail is if I don't keep going.
Yeah.
And two, the idea of not knowing and not getting there.
Yeah.
So that whole concept of manifestation and living as if, no, I'm already there. I'm living this.
Mm-hmm.
And you are living it. But you not knowing, to me, at a certain point in this life, not knowing what could be, is not an option for me. And I don't know if that resonates.
It resonates so deeply with me.
Yeah.
There was a scene in my show that was between me and my inner child, my little girl.
Yeah.
And I feel like I owe her. Like, she knew that she was here to be a star.
Yeah.
And I feel like I owe it to her to give her the opportunity to be who she was born to be. So that's big. And then also, I shared about this yesterday on an Instagram live, but I was talking about how the ego and the soul, right? So these are the two characters in my show. You heard, right? Mm-hmm. So ego's like this East Coast, New York guy's listen, I'm here to tell you, you need to dim your light because people aren't going to like you. And so I've heard that voice a lot, right? And then soul she's she's just more subtle. Mm-hmm. She's like, Amber, you are here to be a star, right? So what I was sharing yesterday was ego is being in a relationship with somebody who is a debater or an attorney, right? Every conversation, they're either trying to win the debate, prove why they're right, or they're an attorney who's winning the case. Yeah. So I have a relationship with this debater who's let me show you all the evidence, right, of why this is not safe and why you're going to fail if you do it, right? Look at that. What do you think you are, right?
Yeah.
And then my relationship with listening to my soul, her role is not as aggressive. Mm-hmm. She doesn't try to prove anything.
Yeah.
She just sits there and goes...
Is that a huge statement?
Right?
Yeah.
She just sits there and goes, you do know that this is why you're here.
Yeah.
You know it. Stop resisting it. It is. Right? So my relationship with her, it's not as convincing at first when you start listening to her.
Yeah.
Ego's way more convincing.
Yeah.
Right?
That is a brilliant point.
He's so convincing.
Yeah.
But I did not get where I wanted to be letting him, be in charge.
Yeah.
So I must.
Yeah.
I must. And there's just something in me. When I was 19 and I was at a really low point in my drug addiction, my aunt had a numerology reading done for me. Mm-hmm. So my birthday is November 22nd, 1122, which apparently are two power numbers.
Yeah, okay.
And the numerologist said that I was here to be of service to the masses. And I remember listening to that. And on one hand, I'm in the depths of my drug addiction going, how is that? How am I going to get there from here? But on another hand, my soul was I know. Mm-hmm. I know that. Right? We talked about this last time we talked, to say that out loud is well, she sure is full of herself, isn't she? She thinks she's here to, it's scary to say that out loud.
It is. And the thing that I have realized is you shining and taking up as much space as you were meant to take up the day you were born doesn't take away from anybody else.
No.
It adds to the world. Imagine if everybody
Yes.
Like, why that collective ego that is dimming the light?
Right?
That's the world I want to live in.
Yeah.
The one where everyone is listening to their
It's
soul.
plugged in.
Is plugged in.
And their
Because I'm
unique
not worried
lamp is
about-
shining.
I'm not worried about I'm not trying to keep anybody down.
Right.
I just want to do what I want to do.
Me too.
Right?
Yeah.
But that competitive, like, spirit of I'm not competing with anybody else.
No.
And it's that abundance mindset that says, like, go and shine and
Right.
don't hold me back, but I'm not here to hold you back.
Right. And
It changes
And think about this.
everything.
Think about this. So I have this woman, Kathy Heller, who I've been
Yeah.
following lately, who I love, and I'm
Yeah.
participating in her course called Abundant Ever After.
Okay.
Okay, so I love her.
Mm-hmm.
I resonate with her deeply.
Yeah.
She's very successful, and she inspires the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Okay, so why am I not going to step in? She's stepping into her full alignment,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly inspiring to me.
Right.
Like, what's inspiring about us sitting around going, yeah, life sucks, right?
Right.
Like,
or why
yeah.
did they do it that way? Did you see what she did? Like,
Yeah.
none of that.
What's
None of
inspiring
that.
about that?
Yeah.
No, I'm done with that. I
Yeah.
did that for way too long. Now I'm like, I will keep going even on the days where I'm like, really, God?
Yeah. Totally.
This is what the plan is right now?
Yeah. Gotta learn to trust.
I'm like, there's no other option for me at this point.
Yeah.
I can't go back.
Yeah.
I can't go back to unplugging.
Well, it's a beautiful thing. So
Thank you. And you are doing the same
thank
thing.
you.
And I
Thank
love
you.
that.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't ever want our conversation to
I know,
end. I was
right?
like,
I know.
can we just hang out here all day long
Right?
and talk about this?
Yeah, and we could cover. I mean, I know
Yeah.
all of this, so many of the things that there's so much alignment between our stories
Yeah.
and the things that we're interested in, and it's good for the world. So
It's
yeah,
good.
we're gonna keep it going.
Thank
but,
you for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But there's one question I ask everybody that comes on my show,
Okay.
and we've talked a lot about your younger self.
Yeah.
But what at this point is a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Okay. That it is safe to be who she's born to be. That I would let her know that the connection and the belonging that she is searching for, if she is searching for it not in her full authentic alignment, it will be unfulfilling,
Yeah.
right? The connection, like this kind of connection, is so fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
fulfilling. Like the connections that I've made as my authentic self are so much more intimate.
Yeah.
And that's what we all want,
Completely.
right? Like we want intimate connection.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to connect intimately, not as your true self, it's not
It won't
happening.
happen.
Brene Brown,
Love her. Of course.
Love her.
Yeah.
she, a quote that she said, and I'm gonna mess it up, but basically what it says is, we can go anywhere and feel like we belong anywhere we go, as long as we're being true to ourselves.
Yeah.
As soon as we betray ourselves to become who we think that you want us to be, our sense of belonging vanishes.
Yeah. And that's nobody else's fault.
This
but
is
our
the
own,
cycle
right?
that we're in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're like, let me be who I think you want me to be, because I don't want to be alone and I want this connection.
Yeah.
But as soon as I stop being true to myself, the connection is lost,
Yeah.
right? So I don't
So
have the
true.
connection that I'm searching for,
And I'm not myself.
and I'm not myself. This
Yeah.
is why I keep going even on the hard days,
Yeah.
because I'm like, it didn't get me anywhere anyways by abandoning myself.
Yeah.
And I had this aha moment recently where, you know, we all say like, oh, I wish I could have this, I wish I could do this. And it's really the resistance in my destiny that I have been experiencing my entire life.
Yeah.
Because on a very
Oh.
fundamental level, like, I know who I am and why I'm here,
Yeah.
but I've been resisting it
Yeah.
because I'm afraid.
For sure. And at some points it's, it's gotten you, feels like it gets you into trouble, but it really doesn't.
It really doesn't.
It's just the way we're taking it in. So,
Yeah,
and we learn.
we learn.
Yeah.
And if you lose something by being your true authentic self,
Then you learn it.
you weren't meant to have it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in full alignment anyways.
Right. It's a beautiful thing to learn. So.
And I've been single for 3 years and I haven't died.
Yeah. Good job.
Yeah, I haven't died by being alone.
Yeah.
I've had lonely moments.
I hear you.
And I'm ready for God to, match me up with my...
next one will be so much healthier and more aligned. And that's why we do the work in part, to connect with the people we're meant to connect with.
Totally.
And it's romantically, and it's a friendship and community and business, and we're doing all of that. And that's how we met. So I'm very grateful, and thank you for this conversation. It is one of my favorites because this is just a topic I could talk about all day long. So
me too.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. And, I love being here.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on What I Meant to Say, and with Amber Susa and Wendy Jones, and just reminding you to be real, be you, and be better. Thank you for joining us on What I Meant to Say, another production of Inspired Edutainment, brought to you by Be Better Media.